Welcome back to this month's episode of the Skin Check with Jenn, and we're back also with season 3. The Skin Check with Jenn is a monthly segment hosted by me, Jenn Schultz, as an opportunity for other low ultraviolet ambassadors and other skin cancer advocates a platform to share their story, offer advice, and also show support for others. So I'm really excited today to introduce you to Stacey. In Stacey's words, Stacey is a wife and a mom to 3 redheads, which I love because she has a boy, a girl, and a dog. She lives in Colorado where she works in PR. She also loves music, eating, traveling, and advocacy, of course. So not only is she one of Low Ultraviolet's ambassadors, but she was also recognized for her advocacy by the Melanoma Research Foundation. So Stacey, first, just I want to thank you so much for being here today. And then in your own words, can you just tell us a little bit more about who you are as a person before we dive into your story?
Sure. Well, first of all, Jenn, thanks for having me. I am
Yeah.
thrilled to be on today and chat with you more about all things related to sun safety. As you said, I live in Denver. I'm a public relations professional. I've been in the PR world now for just about 25 years. I'm a mom of 2, a 13-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. And we have Avishla, who is also our 3rd redhead. Avishla is kind of like a hunting dog. And a few years ago, in 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 2 melanoma, stage 2B. And that was after I had a freckle on my shoulder evolve, and it turned into kind of an inflamed freckle. It's a crazy story because my primary practitioner or my primary physician told me to go have it checked out. I did. They biopsied it, and it came back benign. Well, over the next about 4 or 5 years, the scar from that biopsy evolved into melanoma. And so in 2020, I had noticed that that scar was kind of painful. It was definitely looking different. So I had it biopsied again. And that's when it came back melanoma. So for the first year, I was actually part of a clinical trial that was for high-risk stage 2 survivors that was testing the efficacy of adjuvant immunotherapy for high-risk stage 2. And the clinical trial I was on helped get FDA approval for what is now standard of care for high-risk stage 2B survivors. So now, because of that trial, that is the standard of care, and everyone who is stage 2 does have immunotherapy now. So a year into that, I had a routine scan, and it came back that I did have progression, and I was then diagnosed as stage 4. So I did another clinical trial, and I did about 4 months, I guess it was about 3 months, but 4 cycles of immunotherapy. Thankfully, it worked. And since then, which is actually exactly 2 years as of January, I've been NED, or no evidence of disease. So now for 24 months.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
So that's kind of my survivor story in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, and I got chills when you were talking about like the clinical trials and stuff, because I know you and I are both so involved in like obviously advocacy. We've talked about it, but just a lot of the things that we do and are looking into is funding for like research and clinical trials. And I know one thing, and we'll talk more about DC in a little bit, but one thing last year we really talked about is having more diversity in clinical trials and making sure that people are knowing about clinical trials and all of that. So it's another reason why your story is so important. I love getting to share these stories, but because there's so many things that are similar, but there's also so many things that are unique. And I think we learn a lot from everyone's stories, and the more that we hear.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it helps others just feel like, hey, I'm not alone. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
hear an element of somebody else's story and they realize, oh, that's similar to me. And if that person is doing okay, then I can do okay too. So sharing survivor stories is such an important thing for the community. I'll never forget. It was really a total game changer for me. I think, when you go into the melanoma oncologist office, there not a lot of patients are like us. Not a lot of patients are younger. Not a lot of patients are you know just kind of our generation, and so it makes you feel really alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um so I remember going out into like the social media world looking for other survivors who were, in their 30s or 40s, who were doing really well, not only surviving, but thriving. Um, People who were just out there, like really living their lives with this disease. And when I found those people who we call our Melahomies,
Mm-hmm.
um, it just really gave me an infusion of hope and optimism. Like, hey, there are a lot of people who have this disease, who are surviving it, they are thriving, they are living their lives, and they're doing amazing things out there. And if they can do it, then I can do it. When you're first diagnosed and you just see statistics, you don't see all of the faces and the humans behind those statistics. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a very isolating feeling. But when you actually see the people who are beating the disease, it's a game changer. So that was really an important part of my journey, and why I share my story, because I hope that somebody else out there can be like, okay, there's people that are doing great with this disease, and yeah, I hope that I can be that for somebody.
Yeah. And the statistics, apparently that's a really hard word for me to say today. They are really scary. And what I remember most from my first diagnosis was like they gave me this pamphlet and I went home with it. And the first sentence was melanoma is the deadliest form of skin cancer. And that was the last thing I needed in that moment. And same as you, when I looked around,
Yes.
nobody else looked like me. Like there wasn't anyone else around our age group that had any skin cancer that I knew of, let
Yes.
alone melanoma and really even cancer as a whole. So similar to you, I actually first connected with somebody that had a
Right.
totally different type of cancer on social media because I was just excited to find somebody around my age that I felt a connection to or similarity to that had that. And then through her, I actually met Katie from my melanoma world. And that was how I really connected to like the rest of our
Mhm.
melanomies. And like
Yes.
yeah, it was really isolating, and being able to connect, you like get this community and it's
Hmm.
so supportive. But then like you also mentioned too, being able to see there are a lot of people surviving and thriving and doing great things. And that was sort of how I got into advocacy too. I always say like I didn't seek it out; it kind of found me. I actually just learned the other day
Yeah.
when we were on a call with the Melanoma Research Foundation together that your first advocacy days was also my first advocacy days. And it was the virtual one 2 years ago. So this will be your third advocacy days,
Yes.
right? Yes, same. Um,
Yes.
and I always get asked like how I got into advocacy, and I don't have a great answer for that because like I said, I feel like I fell into it. It kind of found me instead of the other way around. How did you start getting involved in the melanoma advocacy?
Yeah. It's a funny story. It's one of those things that you're like, everything happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
When I was first diagnosed, as I said, I was just really desperate to find other people who were going through the same experience. And I found somebody on Facebook who went to my same oncologist, and I just totally out of the blue messaged her and was like, hey, we go to the same oncologist. Would
Yeah.
you want to get together and talk about your experience? And she is here locally in Denver, and her name is Kristen Steiner, and she has been involved with the MRF now for several years doing advocacy. We got together for coffee. She was fabulous. She told me all about advocacy days, and it just kind of planted a seed where I wasn't ready for that at that moment, but I thought,
Mm-hmm.
if I make it through this, I want to do something like that. You know, she is moving mountains and just really out there, just making the most of what her experience was. And it just kind of at that point, it planted a seed. Like, if I survive, I want to do that. You know, was coming out of treatment for stage 4. And I realized that it was working.
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered, you know, Kristen talking about advocacy days through the MRF. And it just so happened that they were coming up in a couple of weeks at that point.
Oh,
And
wow.
so
So
I
it's
just hopped on the MRF website, and the timing could not have been better. And I just signed up for it. It just was that thing of like, okay, I thought about that early on, that was something I wanted to do, and I want to do it. I'm ready to do it now. At that point, I felt like I had kind of gone through the storm and I was ready to come out the other side and do something positive with what had been a pretty terrifying experience. I think there's also something to going through cancer where you realize that, you know, why have I been letting all of these silly things stop me from doing, you know, these major things that I want to do with my life? You kind of just, I don't know, everything just becomes a lot clearer. And you kind of have this feeling of like, why not me? You
mm-hmm.
know, whereas before you may have been stopped by, I don't know, whatever worries or insecurities, you come out the other side of cancer. And I think you just have this feeling of like, why not me? And just being really, I don't know, those little things don't intimidate you anymore. So I definitely was fueled by that feeling too of like, I am going to jump in with both feet. So that's kind of how I got started with advocacy. And that was my first advocacy days with the Melanoma Research Foundation. And I mean, you can attest to this. They just do an incredible job of preparing you
Mm-hmm.
and helping to educate you and get you ready for those meetings to where it's very, I don't know, it's just very intuitive. It's just very attainable. Like it's just something that they make it easy for you to jump in and do.
Yeah. And you brought up a really important point that, you know, I do have, like, when other people are asking about how do I get involved in advocacy and stuff, you mentioned I kind of tucked that information away and knew it was something I wanted to look into more when I was ready. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of people, they come through treatment or they're in treatment. I know for me, I felt really hopeless. And so advocacy was able to give me a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But it took years before I was ready to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone's timeline is going to be different. But it is something that there's so many
Yeah.
things that you can do, and you have to find what's right for you. And I think even advocacy, like, we're talking more about political advocacy in this space, but there's other different types of advocacy that people can do. But there's like sharing their story on Instagram or just connecting with people more locally. Like when you know, just reached out to Kristen and found somebody and like building up a community of people. There's so many ways that you can get involved. But so the first year, we got to meet in person last year in Washington, D.C., which was incredible. It was really cool to meet so many people that I had been connecting with
It
online
was
in
awesome.
person. Um, but it can be intimidating. And the Melanoma Research Foundation does do an incredible job of preparing us for those meetings, what they're going to look like, letting us know both really what we're
Mm-hmm.
asking for, but then helping us connect it to our story, and then the purpose and reason for the ask. So we're armed with the information that we need to go in there and making sure that we're not ever going in there alone. And I know for me,
Yes.
the first year that I did it, which was also the same for you, it was still virtual. And that took a little bit, I don't know about you, but that took some of the nerves away for me because it just didn't seem quite as intimidating on camera.
Yes, absolutely. And walking, walking outside the Capitol, there's definitely some weight to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it I don't know, it's such a incredible feeling to be there. But yes, to have it virtual the first year was a really great way to warm up to it.
Yeah. Well, and last year you even brought your daughter with you to advocacy days and to your lawmaker meetings, which I thought was so incredible because it's like we're so inspired by other people that we've seen do this work and stuff. But of course, both of your kids being young are so impacted by your diagnosis, and what an incredible way to show her, that her voice can make a difference and that there is something that she can do about these things that she's experiencing already at such a young age.
Yes.
What was
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I was going to just say, what
Go
was
ahead,
the
Jen.
Advocacy Days experience last year like for you, and why is it so important for you to continue attending year after year?
Oh my gosh. Um, Going to Advocacy Days in person was such an incredible experience all the way around. Just being at the US Capitol is something that is unique and so powerful in and of itself. But to feel like we can take the experience that we've had with cancer, with melanoma specifically, like I said, it's a negative, very terrifying experience. And we can transform that into something that is powerful and positive and that has a purpose. That to me helps to get control back of the situation and, help us feel like we have the power back in the situation where we had felt like that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to bring the kids with me also, I just really wanted to, even though it was my first time in person doing something like that, I really just wanted to show them also that we do have a voice in these decisions that are made at the highest levels of government. We have a voice and we can make things happen. I think that, hopefully by them seeing that early in life, they can know that they can get involved in things that are important to them throughout their lives and that they can be among those that are making things happen and making change happen and making good things happen. So hopefully they got that from the experience. But I'm looking forward to going again because we always have more work to do.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very fortunate that I was able to get treatment at a fantastic, what I consider to be a world-class health facility here in Denver. I go to the University of Colorado Hospital, and my experience all the way around was really fantastic being at a research hospital. But I also understand that, not everybody has that kind of facility in their backyard. Maybe people don't have really great insurance. Um, Everyone has a unique experience, and I just want to do whatever I can to help others, to help improve the experience for others that are going through melanoma. Um, it's a tough, it's a tough journey for everybody, regardless. So if there are things that I can help do, then I certainly want to be involved in that kind of effort. And so that's why I want to keep coming back year after year.
Yeah, and then you and I were both also recently selected to join an advocacy committee through the Melanoma Research Foundation. And like we've talked a lot about like going to Washington, D.C., and more of like that big picture, making those big changes. But a lot of it is just even at like the state level and more like grassroots organization, finding other people that are really, interested in advocacy or working with like our local lawmakers to help make our local healthcare more accessible. I know for me personally, like zero copay skin checks are one thing that I'm really hoping to work on. I know like tanning under the age of 18 and not being able to do that is something that a lot of people in other states are working on. And that's one of the really cool things about this committee is it's focusing a lot on like the grassroots advocacy and the local advocacy. What are some of the things that you're looking at like more on your local level and some of the stuff that you've already just been doing in Colorado?
Yeah. So something that I was surprised to learn last year at Advocacy Days was that my state, Colorado, is one where there hasn't really been a lot of action at the state level around the use of tanning beds or banning the use of tanning beds. So that was surprising for me because we typically have a reputation of being a pretty healthy state. We're usually among the top 10 healthiest
Mhm.
states. So also, this is a little fact that is interesting to anyone who might live in places where they're at high altitude. We are closer to the sun. And so our exposure to UV rays is higher as a result. And we also have a higher incidence of skin cancer in Colorado than a lot of other places that are at lower elevation. So it was surprising for me to learn that we hadn't had any initiatives to that effect. So I am hoping to change that. If we're not able to change it on a federal level, then I certainly want to do whatever we can at the state level to make some changes. And I think just overall, another thing that I would love to do is just increase awareness about skin cancer, about melanoma, about the use or the need for using sunscreen every day of the year. The UV rays here in Colorado are very intense. And so it's something that we all need to be aware of 365 days of the year. So I hope that we can do some things around just awareness and education also.
Mhm. And I think too, it's so important at like the state level to get involved in some of that stuff because sometimes at like the federal level, it takes longer. So any of those things that we can do
Right.
at the state level helps make like smaller steps forward. And if one state's able to implement it, and then we can kind of use that blueprint and that to like help another state move forward. And then the more states, it's something for us that we can take back to the national level and to those lawmakers and really say like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why there's a need for it. And it helps get them on board also.
Yes, absolutely.
One of our other committee goals then through the committee that we're in with the MRF is we're really trying to get more survivors and thrivers to our advocacy days in Washington, D.C. And so this isn't really a question for you, but Dee Conway and I had a conversation last year shortly after Advocacy Days about this. And on that episode, we actually went through and listed all of the states that we didn't have representatives for last year. So obviously we want more states represented, but like also how amazing would it be when we like that first day we walk across the street and get our picture taken with everyone in front of the Capitol, and we just like incrementally every year that amount of people in front of the Capitol just got bigger and bigger. It would just be so powerful, and it really sends such a strong message to our lawmakers too. And so I wanted to make sure while we're talking about that I make a note.
Yes.
And then in the show notes, we'll put a list so that people can see what states are represented. Even if your state is represented, obviously, we would love to have anyone who can join or wants to join be a part of it, but especially just getting more and more of those states. And
Absolutely. I think it makes such a statement when you have a strong cohort from a given state coming in to tell their stories. And the more, the merrier. And just something that I wanted to say, we talked about people being ready to tell their story. And, just letting people know that this is something that they can get involved in at any time whenever they are ready. There are opportunities to get involved at a lot of different levels. And, it's, anyone can become an advocate. And the MRF does make it really simple for us. And so I just want to take that element out of it for people. If people are intimidated by that for whatever reason, just to let them know that you don't need any experience. You really just need your lived experience and your story. And that in and of itself is powerful enough. So, anyone can become an advocate, and the more the merrier. We certainly would love to have a greater presence on Capitol Hill in the next several years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such an important point too. And I think the MRF really does a good job of emphasizing that. A lot of people get intimidated. And what if I don't know the information or I need all of the facts? And really all you do need is your story, because really that's what creates change when we go and talk to our representatives and our lawmakers it's those stories that they have the facts a lot of times, or we can always email them and follow up with that information later. It's another contact point for them, obviously, which is a great way to build that relationship. But they can take that story to the floor when they're coming to votes and trying to explain a need for something and say, hey, I have this constituent in my district, and if we were able to do this, she would be able to have access to this, or she would have been able to do this, or it would have made this part of her treatment so much better. Like, those stories are so powerful, and it's really our stories and the collective of voices that really creates the change.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, speaking of change, the last question that I always end these interviews on is, what is the biggest change that you would like to see in regards to melanoma and skin cancer?
Well, I think that would be just like I said earlier. I would just love for more people to have a greater awareness of skin cancer in general, the risks of skin cancer in general, and then an awareness of what melanoma is. I think that there's still a lot of people out there who don't realize that melanoma is not just skin cancer. We hear that phrase a lot in the melanoma community, but I don't think that it's that well known outside of our community. It is the deadliest skin cancer. It is something that can spread throughout your body. And I think people just need to be aware that everyone is at risk of it. So, I just think that general education and awareness about the risks of skin cancer, the risks of melanoma, and how to prevent it, that would just be what I would love to see change over the next several years. And I'd love to be a part of that if at all possible. This diagnosis was something that I never saw coming. I'm somebody who is of Latina background and also Pacific Islander. So for whatever reason, I think it was just ignorance, but I just thought I wasn't prone to skin cancer. And obviously that was not the case. And I learned that the hard way. But I would just love for people to not have to go through what you and I have gone through to understand more about skin cancer and the risks of it.
I agree. That general awareness and just knowing not just like the dangers of it, but really how to prevent it could really help not just catch it earlier, but hopefully just lower the amount of cases that we're having overall.
Yes, absolutely.
Stacey, I want to thank you so much for your time today and sharing your story. And for anyone who is listening and has questions, or maybe wants to ask them more questions about advocacy and how they can get involved, where can they find you if they want to connect and learn more?
Yeah, well, I think the best place to find me is on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active. And my handle is Ecstatic Stacey, and I'll spell it because it's kind of tough, but X, then the word static, and then Stacey, Stacey. And I love to share my journey with melanoma and just kind of what that is like on a day-to-day basis. Lots of stuff about being sun safe and just general family stuff and work stuff too. So I would love to connect with anyone on there, especially people who are early in their diagnosis or going through treatment or anything like that. If I can be of support, I would love to be. So please connect with me there.
Yes, and we'll make sure to put that on both in social media links when the episode goes live, and then also in the show notes as well. So again, Stacey, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you on Capitol Hill in a month and a half.
Thanks, Jen. You too. I can't wait. Thanks so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.